The skill is minimizing and moderation. Minimizing. What does the word minimizing mean? It means to shrink down as much as possible, but it doesn't mean cut out. It doesn't mean no more permanent the rest of your life. You'll never be able to have these foods I mentioned. Minimizing means getting down to as much minimal as possible. That's the key for the foods to avoid. It's just to minimize them, okay? That's better for the mind to wrap its head around. I can minimize certain foods, certain food groups, but cutting them out completely is very stressful, it's very limiting. Remember what I said about diet? What's the first word I think of with diet? Limitation, limiting. That's why I want to remove that connotation of diet. It's minimizing foods and moderation. That's the skill, minimizing and moderation. So what foods am I talking about? Number one priority food group to minimize and avoid if you can completely, but minimize is dairy products. We have to minimize the dairy products. We have to minimize the cow's milk, the heavy cheeses, even the yogurts. I know yogurts, probiotics, this and that. I have a really good probiotic we'll talk about in another video, plant-based, soil-based probiotics that are very important. They survive the stomach acid, they get into the ileum where they belong. But yogurt for probiotic source, even kefir, all of these different things, the dairy is so inflammatory in the gut that any of the probiotics that don't burn up in the stomach acid really don't get where they need to be because of the inflammatory reaction in a weakened gut, especially in a weakened acidic gut environment, which is typically what we're dealing with when we're starting to heal, is we have a very acidic gut, sometimes known as leaky gut. I have my own definition of leaky gut syndrome and what exactly I feel that means, but I won't get too bogged down in that. But the key is the dairy products are very inflammatory. They're highly condensed, thickened sugar. Lactose is a sugar that's just very hard for the body to do anything with. So the old fad of getting your calcium from cow's milk and all that, that's just advertising to sell you milk. You get way more calcium from one slice of an orange that's bioavailable than you would get from a gallon of milk, because the body cannot absorb it. We are not what we eat, but what we absorb. It's a very important principle. So dairy products is the number one priority food group to minimize, moderate. If you want a little bit of feta cheese on your salad, I love cheese, I do. I love cheese. I mean, so I'll use some feta cheese, goat cheese is pretty good. The skill is minimizing and moderation. I'm not saying you can never have cheese again in your life. I'm not saying you can never have a glass of chocolate milk again in your life. What I am telling you is the skill is around minimizing these inflammatory food products for now. And dairy is the number one priority to minimize and moderate right now. Number two is wheat. Gluten products, also very inflammatory on the gut. And when it's inflammatory, it blocks absorption. And wheat, gluten-based products block absorption, nutrient absorption. Yes, digestion is important, it is, but absorption is what we're getting at here. If we're gonna add all this fuel and make all these challenging changes in our lives, we have to maximize nutrient absorption. And gluten, along with dairy, they block that because of the inflammatory response. They feed pathogens, and pathogens then proliferate, and this causes blooming and pain in the gut, constipation, gas, heartburn, GERD, acid reflux. These are all symptoms that we're going to clear out before we ever clear our skin, because the healing begins in the gut with what we eat and what we don't eat. So number two is wheat and gluten products. We're going to try and minimize those. Number three is corn products. And corn used to be a very good source of energy, but this day and age, corn is laced with GMO and it's laced with fungus, and it's better off that we minimize the corn products for now. It really helps the healing process to minimize the corn products. If you find some non-GMO corn chips mixed with quinoa and some sea salt, okay, have some corn chips with your dip. I love corn chips. I love the dip in guacamole and pico de gallo that I make. I do love corn chips, and I do have some occasionally, but my key is I try to minimize the corn for now, for as long as it takes to heal. Once again, nothing is permanent. It's not like you're never gonna not have corn again in your life, but just minimize the amount of corn that you eat. Pay attention, be aware of corn products. in GMO-based corn products. So the next food to minimize as much as possible, and this is an oil that gets snuck into a lot of foods, and it's just good to pay attention to your ingredients list. And when you buy stuff, no canola oil. Try to minimize the canola oil. It's just a highly corrosive irritant on the lining of the gut, the liver. It's just very toxic. Try to stick with the cold pressed olive oils, sesame, sunflower, avocado. When you are buying a hummus, look at which oil it's used to make with. When you're buying chips or anything that's baked or cooked, look at those oils and try to minimize the canola oil. Keep that gut irritant out of your body at all possible. It's a very popular oil. It's cheaper to make than olive oil, so it gets pushed in with a lot of olive oil blends. But try and minimize the canola oil as much as possible. Pay attention to your ingredients list. That's part of the education process, is studying the ingredients list. Canola oil is something we want to keep out. Next thing is natural flavors. I know you see natural flavors, a lot of ingredients lists. If you don't know the source of the natural flavors, if you don't know the brand or the manufacturer of the food you're eating and it says natural flavors on there, that typically hides MSG and other food additives. We gotta keep these poisonous additives out of the body. The less we can put these additives and processed preservatives in the body, the less the liver has to deal with them. So the less we're adding in, the less of this toxic burden on the liver. Guess what? The more the liver can focus on healing. And that's where we need to be. We need to keep the body in a healing state, not an adaptive state, adapting to us. We need to adapt to what the body needs right now and try to minimize the natural flavors. The next thing to minimize for a while is eggs. And eggs have a lot of valuable properties, and they are good if you get cage-free eggs. If you raise your own chickens and you eat some eggs, that's fine. Have a couple eggs. I'm not saying no eggs. But what I do want is to minimize eggs if you have them every day for breakfast, every morning, if they're not cage-free, if they're conventional eggs, you don't know the sourcing of them. The eggs harbor viruses, they harbor pathogens, they harbor heavy metals, they harbor problems in the body. They put a greasy coating on them, so it's harder for the body to eliminate some of these causative factors that we're trying to get rid of. So we just want to minimize eggs. We want to try and move away from if we have a habit of eating eggs every morning for breakfast. When you do have eggs, try to use some olive oil to cook them in, not so much butter. And cook them till they're done and eat them. Don't overcook them, don't burn them in the skillet. And just try to keep the eggs down for now while we're trying to clean up the gut and clean the irritants out of the gut. Next thing to minimize is pork. And this pork is it has a high probability of being worms, fungus, parasites, really hard for the body to process. We don't get any real protein from pork. So just try to minimize the pork. Red meat is, grass-fed is great. A little bit of red meat's not gonna hurt you too bad, hurt your progress. But just in general, meat, the high fat content is hard on the liver to digest. And our approach, our challenge is to minimize the burden on the liver and to get out putrefying foods that have been sitting in there rotting, a lot of the time just animal fats, animal meats. And once again, protein, you get much more protein from vegetable sources than we ever really do get from meats. That's another advertising scheme to sell us more meat. So just trying to minimize the pork specifically. Go for some baked chicken, rotisserie chicken, some wild-caught salmon if you like fish, some wild-caught river fishes. Like I said, a little bit of grass-fed beef, sure, fine. But if you can have a couple vegetarian days a week, 2-3 vegetarian days a week, try some vegetarian dishes, that's gonna really help the process along because it's less digestive burden and it's less processing burden on the gut and the bowel. So we're gonna try and minimize that. Then we have white sugar, right? Alcohol, white sugar, candies, treats, sweets, processed white fermented sugars. Want to try and minimize those. And having a chocolate here and there, great. Having some Twizzlers or something at the movies, okay. But we're gonna try and cut down the sodas, the processed corn syrups, the high fructose corn syrups, especially the aspartames, the sugar substitutes, If you really want a sweet kick, raw wildflower honey. Incredible phytochemicals, antioxidants for the body. It makes all the other nutrients more bioavailable and very sweet and delicious. I've gone to raw wildflower honey in coffee, in tea. Very tasty. Stevia is another one, a plant-based sweetener, very sweet. Only need a little bit if you want to use that as a sweetener in your coffee. Try those two things in your drink or your tea. If you love soda, really break it down. Try some mineral water, some organic apple juice or cranberry juice. Put some stevia in it if you want some extra sweetness. Put it on the rocks, squeeze in the lime, and see if you can't make yourself a little bit like a little soda. There's soda machines. You can make carbonated water, and see if you can work with that. See what it is. Is it a habit, or is it what's in it? I used to drink Dr. Pepper all the time, Mountain Dew. It was lattes all morning, Dr. Pepper Mountain Dew in the afternoon. And when I started to natural healing, I broke down, what do I really like about the soda? And I realized it was the fizz, the bubbly. So I did mineral water, some cranberry juice, some lime, maybe some coconut water and mineral water, and put it on the ice, and tell you what, really refreshing drink and really satisfying. So we're going to be working with food, our relationship with food in all these different ways. That's part of these skills we're building. But we are going to try to minimize the white sugar, the alcohol. If you have a beer or two, fine. Red wine has actually got some antioxidants in it. It's got some healing properties. That's fine, having a glass of red wine. Remember, the skill is minimizing and moderation. Moderation. If you go out to dinner and you have a glass of red wine, a steak and potatoes and French fries, whatever the case may be. Okay, just get back to the fuel, get back to the practice. Don't beat yourself up. No guilt, no punishment. Just enjoy the meal and get back to work. Minimizing moderation. So we got dairy, we got wheat and gluten, we got corn, we got canola oil, natural flavors, eggs, pork, white sugars, simple sugars, alcohol. We're going to try and minimize those things as much as possible for now in that priority list. The less dairy you can eat, it's a huge exponential factor on your healing. So when we do, we're going to moderate that. Minimizing, moderation.